Laura Bennett stood at the viewing window of the transport ship, watching as the massive Zalthiri Central Medical Station grew larger against the backdrop of Proxima Centauri. Her heart raced with excitement and nervousness. After 15 years as a trauma surgeon in Seattle, she never imagined she would be the first human doctor selected for the Interspecies Medical Exchange Program. The station looked like a giant silver snowflake, with 6 pointed arms extending from a central hub. Each arm housed different medical departments, research labs, and treatment centers. Beautiful blue lights pulsed along its surface, marking the paths of emergency transport systems. "Dr. Bennett, please prepare for docking procedures," the ship's AI announced. Laura adjusted her uniform, making sure the Earth Medical Corps badge was straight. She had practiced her introduction countless times, determined to make a good first impression. The docking bay was a marvel of alien engineering. Sleek silver walls curved overhead, and the air smelled like mint and something else she couldn't identify. A small group of Zalthiri waited for her. Their tall, slender bodies were covered in pale blue scales that shimmered under the lights. Their four-fingered hands were clasped in front of them in what she recognized as their formal greeting pose. The tallest of them stepped forward. "I am Dr. Xintal, Chief Medical Officer of this facility." Their voice had an odd musical quality, like wind chimes in a breeze. "Welcome to our station, though I must admit, I find it curious that your species sends only one representative." Laura smiled politely, ignoring the slight edge in their tone. "Thank you for having me, Dr. Xintal. I look forward to learning from your advanced medical knowledge and sharing our own techniques." "Yes, well, we shall see what your primitive medical practices might offer." Dr. Xintal's head tilted slightly, their silver eyes scanning Laura as if she were a curious specimen. "Please follow me. I will show you to your quarters and then to the medical bay." As they walked through the station's corridors, Laura couldn't help but marvel at the technology around them. Holographic displays showed patient vital signs floating in midair. Medical drones zipped silently through dedicated transport tubes. Everything was spotless, organized, and running with perfect efficiency. Dr. Xintal led her into the main medical bay. The room was enormous, with dozens of treatment pods arranged in neat rows. Each pod contained advanced diagnostic and treatment equipment that made Earth's best hospitals look like ancient history. "This is where we handle most routine procedures," Dr. Xintal explained. "Though I doubt you have seen anything like this before. Our medical technology has evolved beyond the need for primitive cutting tools or chemical medications." Laura bit her tongue. She had been warned about this Zalthiri's tendency toward arrogance, especially in medical matters. "Every medical tradition has value, Dr. Xintal. We humans have developed many effective techniques that work well with our biology." A small group of Zalthiri medical staff gathered nearby, watching her with obvious curiosity. One younger-looking alien, who Laura would later learn was named Venra, seemed particularly interested, taking notes on a holographic pad. "Speaking of biology," Dr. Xintal continued, "I must express my concerns about your species' involvement in this exchange. Your biological systems are so inefficient. The amount of rest you require alone is quite shocking, not to mention your limited healing capabilities and crude immune responses." Laura took a deep breath, maintaining her professional composure. "Perhaps we could schedule some comparative analysis sessions. I would be happy to demonstrate how human biology functions under various conditions." Yes, we will arrange something." Dr. Xintal waved a hand dismissively. "For now, you may observe our procedures. Try to keep up with our medical protocols, and please refrain from touching anything without supervision. We wouldn't want any accidents." As Laura followed Dr. Xintal through the rest of the tour, she noticed Venera trailing behind them, still taking notes. At least someone seemed genuinely interested in learning about humans. She would need allies here if she was going to prove that human medicine and biology deserved respect. The next few days would be challenging, but Laura was determined to show these advanced aliens that humanity's medical knowledge was worth their attention. She just didn't expect how soon that opportunity would come, or how dramatically it would change everything. 3 days into her stay at the Zalthiri Medical Station, Laura sat in the Grand Conference Hall, surrounded by hundreds of alien medical professionals. The room buzzed with musical Zalthiri voices as Dr. Xintal prepared to give their presentation on comparative species biology. The massive holographic display came to life, showing a detailed image of human internal organs alongside Zalthiri ones. Laura noticed several younger medical students whispering and pointing at her, making her feel like a specimen in a zoo. Esteemed colleagues, Dr. Xintal began, their voice carrying across the hall. Today we examine the peculiarities of human biology, which our Earth visitor has graciously allowed us to study. I must say, the results are quite amusing. Quiet laughter rippled through the audience. Laura gripped the edges of her seat, but kept her face neutral. Observe their circulatory system, Dr. Xintal continued, zooming in on a human heart. A single heart with only 4 chambers, pumping blood through vessels that can easily tear or clog. Compare this to our superior 3-heart system with built-in redundancy. The hologram shifted to show sleep patterns. Perhaps most shocking is their need for extended periods of unconsciousness. Humans spend nearly 1/3 of their lives in a state they call sleep. Imagine such waste. While we require only 2 hours of mental alignment per cycle, they lie helpless for 8 hours or more. More laughter filled the room. Laura saw Venra, the young intern, looking uncomfortable at the back of the hall. Their immune system is equally primitive, Dr. Xintal declared. When faced with infection, their bodies respond with inflammation and fever, literally burning themselves to fight disease. How they survived as a species is quite remarkable. Laura stood up, her voice clear and steady. Dr. Xintal, may I address the assembly? The alien doctor paused, silver eyes widening slightly. Well, this is irregular, but perhaps it would be enlightening to hear the human perspective. Please, Dr. Bennett, share your thoughts. Walking to the center of the room, Laura faced the audience. Thank you. While our biology might seem inefficient to you, each aspect serves a purpose. Our sleep cycles, for instance, allow for complex memory consolidation and cellular repair. Our immune system's inflammatory response, while seemingly crude, is incredibly effective at isolating and eliminating threats. Effective? Dr. Xintal scoffed. Your species still suffers from countless diseases we eliminated centuries ago. Yet we survive conditions that would kill most species, Laura countered. Human beings have lived through massive radiation exposure, survived freezing temperatures, recovered from losing large portions of their organs, and adapted to extreme environments. Our primitive biology allows us to eat almost anything, live almost anywhere, and recover from injuries that would be fatal to many species. Bold claims, Dr. Xintal said. Perhaps you would be willing to participate in a comparative analysis to prove these supposed advantages. I would welcome that opportunity, Laura replied. In fact, I propose a full research project. Let's study how human and Zalthiri bodies respond to various challenges. No danger to any participants, of course, but thorough enough to provide real data. Dr. Xintal's scales shifted color slightly, showing surprise at her confidence. Very well. I will arrange the necessary protocols. Though I warn you, the results may not be what you hope for. Science isn't about hope, Dr. Xintal. It's about discovery. Sometimes the most important discoveries come from studying systems we think we understand. As Laura returned to her seat, she noticed more Zalthiri watching her with interest. Her challenge had caught their attention. Now she just needed to prove humans were more capable than these aliens believed. Kevin Martinez, her fellow human doctor who had arrived the previous day, gave her a subtle thumbs up from his seat. They would need to prepare carefully for these tests. The chance to change alien minds about human biology wouldn't come again soon. As the conference continued, Laura began planning her approach. She didn't expect to prove human superiority. That wasn't the point. She wanted to show that different didn't mean worse, that evolution had given each species its own strengths. She just hoped the Zal theory were ready to learn that lesson. Laura and Kevin worked late into the night shift in their assigned laboratory, reviewing the results of their first week of tests. The room glowed with the soft blue light of holographic displays showing various biological readings. Empty coffee cups sat beside their workstation, a very human addition to the otherwise pristine Zal theory lab. "Look at these healing rates," Kevin said, pointing to a chart. "Our tissue samples are showing faster recovery than they expected." He pushed his glasses up and leaned closer to the display. "Especially in high-stress conditions." Laura nodded, studying the data. They had been running tests on tissue samples from both species, exposing them to various forms of damage and tracking their recovery. The results were fascinating. "The Zal theory healing is more efficient in perfect conditions," she said, "but add any complications. Temperature changes, chemical exposure, radiation, and human tissue adapts better." Their work was interrupted by the arrival of Venra, the young Zal theory intern who had been helping them. Unlike most of their alien colleagues, Venra showed genuine curiosity about human biology. "Dr. Bennett, Dr. Martinez," Venra chirped excitedly. "I've completed the stress response trials you requested. The results are unexpected." The intern projected a new set of data. The display showed how cells from both species reacted to sudden environmental changes. The human cells showed remarkable adaptation, while the Zal theory cells struggled to maintain function when conditions weren't perfect. "It's like comparing a Swiss Army knife to a specialized surgical tool," Kevin explained to Venra. "Your biology is more advanced, but ours is more flexible." Laura started documenting their findings. "Human bodies are constantly dealing with less than ideal conditions. We eat different foods every day, experience temperature changes, face new germs. Our bodies evolved to handle chaos." The lab door slid open with a soft hiss. Dr. Xintel walked in, their scales slightly darker with disapproval at the casual atmosphere in the lab. "I see you're still pursuing this pointless research," they said. "Any interesting discoveries about human inadequacies?" Laura pulled up their latest results. "Actually, yes, but perhaps not the inadequacies you expected." She showed how human tissue samples adapted to multiple stressors simultaneously. "Our biology might surprise you." Dr. Xintel studied the data, their silver eyes narrowing. "Clearly there must be an error in your testing methods. No primitive system could outperform our biology in any circumstance." "The results have been verified 3 times, Venra said quietly. "I supervised the protocols myself." "Then you must have made a mistake," Dr. Xintel snapped. "Run them again. All of them. Under proper Zal theory supervision this time." After the chief doctor left, Kevin turned to Laura. "They're scared," he said. "These results challenge everything they believe about biological advancement." Laura started setting up new sample trays. "Then we'll test everything again. And again. Until the evidence is too clear to ignore." They worked through their sleep cycle, running test after test. Venra stayed to help, fascinated by how human tissue samples responded to various challenges. The young alien asked endless questions about Earth's varied environments and how humans had adapted to them. "Your bodies are like survival machines," Venra said with wonder, "always ready to change, to adapt. Our biology is more like a perfect machine that needs perfect conditions." As morning approached, their new results confirmed everything they'd found before. Human biology showed incredible adaptation abilities. Wounds healed differently based on the type of damage. Cells modified their functions to protect against repeated stress. The immune system learned and remembered new threats. "Dr. Xintel won't like this," Venra warned, looking at their latest data. "Dr. Xintel needs to learn that different isn't inferior," Laura said. "But I have a feeling they're about to learn that lesson the hard way." She had no idea how right she was, or how soon that lesson would come. The explosion rocked the entire medical station. Laura was reviewing test results with Kevin when the emergency alarm started blaring. Red lights flashed through the corridors as the station's AI announced the crisis in multiple languages. Emergency in Engineering Section 7. Multiple casualties reported. All medical personnel report to emergency stations. Laura and Kevin rushed to the emergency transport tube. They found Venera already inside, medical kit ready. The young alien's scales had paled to an almost white color from stress. "What happened?" Laura asked as they sped through the station. "Cooling system failure in the reactor maintenance area," Venera explained. Both Zalthiri and human engineering crews were caught in the blast. They arrived at a scene of chaos. The engineering section was filled with smoke and steam. Injured crew members lay everywhere. The site stopped Dr. Xintol in their tracks. Their perfect medical bay was now a disaster zone. "Begin standard treatment protocols," Dr. Xintol ordered, but their voice shook slightly. "Get everyone into medical pods immediately." Laura quickly assessed the situation. The pods won't work fast enough. There are too many injured, and the radiation levels are still too high. "We need to do this the old way." She turned to Kevin. "Get our emergency kits from the lab. The ones we brought from Earth." He nodded and sprinted off. "You can't be serious," Dr. Xintol protested. "Your primitive methods will save lives right now." Laura cut them off. She knelt beside the nearest victim, a young Zalthiri engineer with severe burns. "Your pods are designed for perfect conditions. This isn't perfect. This is an emergency." Kevin returned with their kits. Laura started treating the burns with special bandages designed for radiation exposure. She had treated similar injuries after nuclear plant accidents on Earth. "Venera, help me." "These bandages pull out radiation and help tissue regenerate." "Kevin, start triage. Worst cases first, both human and Zalthiri." The young intern moved quickly to help, following Laura's instructions. Even Dr. Xintol stood watching in surprise as the human doctors worked. "The radiation levels are still too high," one Zalthiri medical officer reported. "Our healing processes are being disrupted." "Humans adapt to radiation exposure better than most species," Laura explained as she worked. "Our cells can repair radiation damage while continuing to function. That's why we're still able to help." She turned to Dr. Xintol. "Your people need immediate care. The medical pods will help later, but right now they need direct treatment. Will you help us?" The chief doctor hesitated only a moment before joining them. Under Laura's guidance, they began treating patients using Earth medical techniques. Simple bandages, injectable medicines, and direct physical care. Hours passed as they worked to stabilize everyone. The humans showed the Zalthiri how to handle emergency conditions without relying on their advanced technology. They taught them about triage, about treating patients where they lay, about making quick decisions with limited resources. When the crisis finally ended, the results were clear. The patients treated with Earth methods were stabilizing faster than those who had waited for pod treatment. The human ability to handle radiation exposure had allowed them to keep working when most Zalthiri medical staff had to retreat. "I don't understand," Dr. Xintol said quietly to Laura as they watched the last patients being moved to recovery areas. "Our methods are more advanced. Our biology is more refined. How did your emergency treatments work better?" "Because sometimes simpler is better," Laura explained. "And sometimes what looks like a weakness is really a strength. Humans get hurt easily, yes. But that means we got very, very good at treating injuries under bad conditions." She looked at the recovering patients. "Perfect biology is wonderful when everything is perfect. But out here in the real world, you need systems that can handle imperfection. That's what humanity does best." Dr. Xintol stared at the emergency room for a long moment. "Perhaps," they said slowly, "we have more to learn from humans than I thought." 2 days after the engineering accident, Dr. Xintol called an emergency meeting of the medical staff. The large conference room was packed with both Zalthiri and human medical personnel. The mood was different now. The alien doctors no longer looked at their human colleagues with dismissal or amusement. Laura sat in the front row next to Kevin, both still tired from treating patients. Venra stood near them, datapad ready to record everything. Recent events have forced us to question our understanding of biological advancement, Dr. Xintel began. Their voice was softer than usual, missing its usual tone of superiority. I am launching a full investigation into human biological responses and healing mechanisms. A holographic display came to life, showing medical scans from the accident victims. Side by side, they could see how differently the two species had reacted to the same injuries. The human medical team remained functional despite radiation levels that forced most of our staff to retreat. Dr. Xintel continued. Their emergency treatment methods, while seemingly primitive, proved more effective in crisis conditions than our advanced healing pods. Laura pulled up her own research data. If I may, Dr. Xintel. The alien doctor nodded, and she stood to address the room. Human cells have amazing adaptation abilities, she explained, showing microscopic views of tissue samples. When exposed to radiation, our cells don't just die or stop working. They change. They adapt. Some even become stronger. Kevin added his own data to the display. We've seen the same pattern in other types of damage. Burns, cuts, chemical exposure. Human tissue responds differently each time, learning from the injury. The room filled with curious whispers as the Zalthiri doctors studied the evidence. Venra stepped forward, eager to share their observations. In my work with Dr. Bennett and Dr. Martinez, I've documented 47 distinct ways human cells can modify their behavior based on environmental conditions, the young intern said. Our cells, in comparison, have only 12 possible response patterns. Dr. Xintel moved through the data with growing interest. Your neural adaptation rates are particularly fascinating. Human brains actually create new pathways around damaged areas. Yes, Laura confirmed. We call it neuroplasticity. Our brains constantly rewire themselves, finding new ways to work even after severe injury. The chief doctor turned to face the room. I propose we expand this investigation. Full access to our medical databases and research facilities. We need to understand exactly how human biology achieves these adaptations. For the next several hours, they reviewed case after case. They studied how human bones grew back stronger where they broke, how skin became tougher after healing from burns, how the human immune system remembered and improved its responses to each new threat. It's like your entire biology is designed to learn from damage, one Zalthiri researcher observed with wonder. Not designed, Laura corrected. Evolved. Earth is a dangerous place. Species that couldn't adapt didn't survive. Humans ended up with bodies that treat every injury as a lesson, every challenge as a chance to improve. Dr. Xintel paused the displays. Dr. Bennett, I owe you and your species an apology. We assumed that biological advancement meant reaching a state of perfection. But your imperfect biology allows you to survive conditions that would kill our people. Perhaps true advancement is not about achieving perfection, but about maintaining adaptability. Laura smiled. Different evolutionary paths, different solutions. Neither better nor worse, just different. As the meeting continued, more Zalthiri doctors came forward with questions and observations. The wall between the species was breaking down, replaced by genuine scientific curiosity. But none of them realized that an even greater test of human adaptability was about to begin, one that would change both species forever. A week of intense research had changed everything on the medical station. In the main laboratory, Laura and Kevin worked alongside Dr. Xintel and a team of Zalthiri scientists, studying the latest test results. The room buzzed with excitement as new discoveries emerged daily. These cellular repair mechanisms are extraordinary, Dr. Xintel said, examining a human tissue sample. When exposed to damage, your cells don't just heal, they improve their defense systems for future threats. Laura nodded, pointing to a display showing immune system responses. Our bodies remember every infection, every injury, every stress they encounter. Each challenge makes us stronger. Venera rushed into the lab, their scales flickering with excitement. Dr. Bennett, we've finished analyzing the genetic data from the accident victims. You need to see this immediately. The young intern projected a new set of images. They showed how human DNA had actually changed in the cells exposed to radiation, creating new protective mechanisms. This is why we survived on Earth, Kevin explained. Our planet threw everything at us. Diseases, climate changes, natural disasters. We didn't just survive. We got better at surviving. Dr. Xintel studied the data carefully. Our own biology evolved differently. We developed in a more stable environment, so our bodies became perfectly adapted to those specific conditions. We achieved biological perfection, but lost adaptability in the process. The chief doctor moved to the center of the lab, addressing all present. I must make a formal announcement about our findings. The entire medical community needs to understand what we've discovered. An hour later, the station's largest conference hall was packed. Every available screen showed the proceedings to medical facilities across Zalthiri space. Dr. Xintel stood before them all, their usual pride replaced by humble awareness. My fellow medical professionals, they began, I stand before you to correct a grave error in our understanding. We have long believed that our biology represented the peak of evolution. We were wrong. Murmurs spread through the crowd as Dr. Xintel displayed the research results. Human biology, which we dismissed as primitive, demonstrates advancement in ways we never considered. While we pursued perfection, they developed something perhaps more valuable: endless adaptability. The displays showed case after case of human healing and adaptation. Bones that grew stronger after breaks. Immune systems that learned from every infection. Brains that rewired themselves after injury. Cells that changed their very structure to survive new threats. Our perfect biology is like a crystal, Dr. Xintel explained. Beautiful, flawless, but rigid. Human biology is like water, flowing, changing, adapting to any container, any condition. There is wisdom in this that we must study and understand. Laura stood up to join Dr. Xintel. We're not better than you, she said to the assembled aliens. We're just different. Your biology is incredibly advanced in its own way. But maybe true biological advancement isn't about reaching perfection. It's about maintaining the ability to change and grow. The room erupted in discussion as doctors and researchers began to see the possibilities. If they could understand how human biology achieved this adaptability, they might be able to help their own people become more resilient. Dr. Bennett, Dr. Xintel said, turning to Laura, I propose we establish a permanent joint research program. Together, we could develop medical treatments that combine the best of both our species, your adaptability and our precision. Laura smiled. I think that's an excellent idea. After all, that's another thing humans are good at, adapting our knowledge and working together to become better than we were before. As the excitement spread through the station, none of them realized that their greatest challenge and opportunity for cooperation was approaching. A medical emergency was heading their way that would require everything both species had learned about each other. The alert came at the worst possible time. A passenger ship carrying both humans and Zalthiri had encountered a strange space anomaly. Dozens of passengers were sick with an unknown illness that seemed to affect both species differently. They'll be here in 20 minutes, Dr. Xintel announced to the emergency response team. We have no idea what we're dealing with, but both species are showing severe symptoms. Laura and Kevin quickly prepared the medical bay, working alongside their Zalthiri colleagues. The last few weeks of cooperation had transformed the station. Human emergency supplies now stood ready beside advanced alien medical pods. First patients arriving now, Venera called out as the emergency transport tubes activated. The patients arrived in waves. Humans with high fevers and strange markings on their skin. Zalthiri with their scales turning dark and their breathing labored. The medical bay quickly filled with the sick and injured. Standard treatments aren't working, one Zal theory doctor reported. The medical pods can't identify the illness. Laura studied the symptoms carefully. Look at how differently each species is reacting. The humans are running fevers, fighting it off. The Zal theory bodies aren't mounting any defense at all. Our perfect immune systems don't know how to adapt to something this new, Dr. Xintol realized. But the humans, our bodies are trying to figure it out, Kevin confirmed, checking patient readings. The fevers, the skin reactions, it's all part of our adaptive response. Laura's eyes lit up with an idea. What if we combine our approaches? Use the human immune response to identify the threat, then program your medical pods to target it specifically. Dr. Xintol quickly grasped the concept. Yes, we can use our technology to analyze how human bodies are fighting this illness, then apply that knowledge to help our people. They worked frantically, taking samples from human patients whose conditions were improving. The Zal theory medical pods analyzed the human immune response, learning how their bodies were adapting to fight the mysterious illness. Look at this, Venera called out, pointing to their screens. The human immune system is creating completely new antibodies we've never seen before. They're actually evolving their defenses in real time. Dr. Xintol quickly programmed these findings into their treatment protocols. Remarkable. We can use their adaptive response as a template for our own treatments. Hours passed as they treated patient after patient. The combined approach began to show results. Human patients recovered naturally, their adaptable bodies learning to fight the illness. Zal theory patients, treated with the modified protocols based on human immune responses, began to stabilize. Finally, the crisis passed. The medical bay grew quiet as patients rested comfortably, both species on the road to recovery. I never imagined our greatest breakthrough would come from studying what we thought was primitive biology, Dr. Xintol said, standing with Laura as they watched the recovering patients. Laura smiled. The best solutions often come from combining different approaches, your advanced technology and our adaptable biology. Together, they're stronger than either alone. 1 month later, the station celebrated the opening of the first Joint Species Medical Research Center. Dr. Xintol and Laura stood together as co-directors, their earlier rivalry replaced by deep respect and friendship. Today marks a new chapter in medical science, Dr. Xintol announced to the assembled crowd. We've learned that true advancement isn't about achieving perfection. It's about never stopping to learn, adapt, and grow. Just like human biology has been teaching us all along. Venera, now a lead researcher in the new center, beamed with pride. The young intern who had first shown interest in human biology was now at the forefront of combining both species' medical knowledge. As Laura looked around at humans and Zal theory working together, she thought about how far they'd come. From mockery to partnership, from dismissal to respect. Sometimes the best way to prove your worth wasn't through argument or anger, but by simply showing what you could do when given the chance. Ready to start another day of research? Dr. Xintol asked. Always, Laura replied. After all, adaptation never stops. There's always something new to learn. And in that spirit, human and alien medicine moved forward together, each making the other better than they had been before.